Because playing fair, being scared, that gets you nowhere. That gets you beat.
I'm a weird guy. I know, shocker. I'm someone putting videos out on YouTube. We're all kind of weird. But in terms of this video, I'm weird because when I enjoy a movie, I want to hear the criticisms. Maybe one great part of a film made me miss another part that was horribly flawed. The Amazing Spider-Man as one example. Man, did it hit me emotionally, but damn, is that story a mess. More broadly, I'd like to create my own stories, so seeing the criticisms helps me to learn. And just because something is flawed doesn't mean I'll suddenly stop loving it. My favorite Kingsman movie is The Golden Circle, and anyone who says that story is perfect is lying to themselves. But other times I see criticisms that are so ass backwards, so dog shit, so off base that I have to question if the person even saw the movie before they decided they were going to shit on it. Cinemasins and The Critical Drinker are two easy examples, but today it's upper echelon. To give some context, I saw I Care a Lot, was blown away, told a few close friends to run to Netflix, and then hopped on YouTube, and Upper Echelon's review was top of the results. And the level of brain dead on display when I watched it gave me such a headache, one so bad that I went to the doctor, and for the next 2 years I got trapped in a nursing home under a bullshit guardianship. That's why it's taken me so long to make this video, not because I knew it'd be a miserable experience hearing all these dumbass claims. You know what? Sorry, I'm coming in too hot. I'm treating Upper Echelon like The Critical Drinker, and honestly, I don't know that that's true, so allow me to dial it down while you hit the like button, and let's just go through everything. Some intro and filler stuff will be cut out because including everything wouldn't make it a fair use transformation, so after watching this, watch their video to see if I've left crucial details out to make some bad faith arguments. In other words, make sure I didn't do what Upper Echelon did. Let's start.
There are horrifying plot holes, disgusting hypocrisies, and more so than anything else, while scrolling through the discourse surrounding this film, especially on social media, and even while watching it, I found myself becoming annoyed at the shallow, meaningless, even flat-out embarrassing angles of praise it is seemingly inspiring.
Remember that he claims that there are horrifying plot holes and disgusting hypocrisies because we'll see later how empty those claims are. But this third frustration that people's interpretations of the film are wrong is especially weird in a video criticizing the movie, because Fight Club is a film that's been getting decades of praise by people who misunderstood the film and how it's an indictment of toxic masculinity. One might criticize that film for failing to better communicate its message, but that's not what Upper Echelon does here. Also, by the end of this video, you'll see how he's done something similar. Something I see echoed a lot in the user reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, forming an opinion based on a total misunderstanding of the film.
There is a torrential downpour of praise about how this strong, female, powerful businesswoman will stop at nothing to succeed, so it's inspiring and a ruthless critique of capitalism.
It's interesting to me that Upper Echelon doesn't provide any of these salacious examples that took the internet by storm. Google Trends doesn't support the claim that there was a torrential downpour of praise, compared to Glass Onion, a film that grabbed social media so much that even my scrappy little channel got a gargantuan amount of attention. I Care a Lot got only 37% of the attention that the Knives Out sequel got.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
And compared to The Wolf of Wall Street, a film with an incredibly similar villain protagonist, it got 20%. Over on YouTube specifically, it barely got 3% of Wolf's attention at its height. Not a great start.
Marla Grayson is an anti-hero, or rather, she is supposed to be an anti-hero. Anti-heroes, despite being morally ambiguous, sometimes even flat-out evil at other times, are still characterized by their ability to win over an audience. The difference between an antagonist and an anti-hero is that the antagonist is not necessarily supposed to form connections to the audience, and the anti-hero usually is.
Upper Echelon misunderstands the main character Marla Grayson, claiming she is an anti-hero. She is not. She is, as I said, a villain protagonist. It's not surprising that Upper Echelon misunderstands this because he only gets the definition of anti-hero half right. Some of his examples:
someone would be pushed to, for instance, rob a bank to pay for a family member's medical treatment, or because their home was foreclosed on and they need to support their children,
are in fact anti-villains. But it is strange because his description of her is an accurate description of her as a villain protagonist. He's just constructed this whole frame claiming that she's an anti-hero so he can outline all the ways she isn't. It'd be like me claiming that his video is supposed to be a CinemaSins style video and then criticizing it for not having a timer and a sin counter and criticizing it for not being even lower quality criticism.
Some of the best antagonists or villains in modern cinema do often allow for sympathy or at least a basic understanding of their moral framework, even if one does not personally agree with it, which makes them infinitely more complex when true.
Upper Echelon claims that this film doesn't allow us to understand Marla's moral framework or why she does what she does, which, to put it subtly, is total bullshit. The movie opens with a monologue that outlines her moral framework. She believes all people are secretly bad, and that the only way to succeed in the world is by taking advantage of others, being a lion, not a gazelle. And as for why, she spells that out too.
$10 million, that's not such a big deal for you. But for me, that's a start. That's enough to be able to use money as a weapon. Like a bludgeon. The way real rich people do. That's what I want.
And then things get weirder.
Let's make it a bit more extreme. There is a movie called Assault on Wall Street, where the anti-hero loses his wife, not of natural causes by the way, after the hedge fund screws him out of his savings. He gets laid off, he loses everything, really, and he plans out an assault on the building where the CEO of that particular fund works, killing many people along the way, ultimately enacting revenge against the man in a final head-to-head battle of resolve. This man is not a hero. However, even though these horrible acts do occur that cannot ever be rightly supported, a tiny voice in the back of the audience's mind will tell them, yeah, I kinda get it. I understand why. In some small way, I'm kinda rooting for him.
So Upper Echelon puts his stamp of approval on a movie called Assault on Wall Street. I've never seen it, but by his description, the anti-villain, even though he calls them incorrectly an anti-hero, is a man who takes revenge by killing a lot of people. And I'm left wondering why a film about a man killing a bunch of innocent/innocent-ish people is an acceptable story, but a woman using her cunning to take advantage of innocent people is not an acceptable story. And I'll take the opportunity to say this. I'm not saying Upper Echelon is intentionally being sexist or even unintentionally. There's always the possibility that he's coming to this conclusion because of all his misunderstandings, and trust me, there are many more misunderstandings to come, but the reality is we do live in a patriarchy, and as men, we should question our feelings towards women or projects starring women past our knee-jerk reactions, because, like it or not, a lot of us have internalized misogyny as a result of growing up in a patriarchal system, and I am not excluding myself from that. I've been more ignorant and then grown as a result of questioning my own beliefs and my own ideas. That's just throwing that out there as something to think about. Every guy, I think, should chew on that. In general, not in relation to just this movie.
This movie is entirely unsuccessful in its endeavor to create an anti-hero, and through skilled acting, by the way, creates a story about someone horrible doing entirely awful things, self-deluding herself into believing that she isn't all of the things she so clearly is, while hating men for absolutely no legitimate reason, and ultimately, you just want her to die.
This one makes my blood boil for a few reasons. Upper Echelon claims that Marla hates men for absolutely no legitimate reason. Let's just broadly cover the claim that Marla, a woman, has no legitimate reason to hate men. In the US, 1 in 6 women has been a victim of a successful or unsuccessful attempt. And to be very clear, statistically, it's more than 5 out of every 6 of those women whose attacker was successful. And that's just the reported ones. So the idea that a woman doesn't already have a legitimate reason to hate men in general is insane. Like, if you're in the US and know 6 women, statistically, 1 of them has been a victim of a attempt, successful or not. Now, specifically speaking on the film, Marla doesn't hate men. She reframes a confrontation with a man so that she can win the argument because she knows arguing the merits of the case is a losing situation for her. And when her partner Fran is worried about Roman's lawyer and the threats he made, Marla outlines that she's been threatened by thousands of men and been the victim of 2 of those threats, which would again be a legitimate reason for her to hate men. But she never claims to hate men. She uses the arguments that will suit her best. That's why when she's battling Roman, she never brings up gender politics, because it wouldn't help her. Again, not claiming I know that Upper Echelon is sexist, but it's a weird claim that has no merit in reality and no merit in regards to the actual film. And the cherry on top of it all is how many men she works with. She works with Dr. Rice at the nursing facility, asks after Mikey, and ends up working with Roman at the end of the film.
The film starts right in with a monologue and a judicial hearing. I'm a lioness, I'm powerful, you either take or you get taken, etc., etc. An age-old trope from Marla Grayson of how the strong will dominate the weak. However, Marla Grayson preys on the elderly. She preys on those with memory loss. She preys on them with the help of the government. And this is not, in fact, a story about the strong preying on the weak, because she is not strong in any capacity whatsoever. This is a story about a parasite, a weak parasite, using more powerful, actually powerful institutions, such as the government, medical, or pharmaceutical industries, to prey on the weakest among us.
This is weird because Upper Echelon takes Marla's claim that she is someone strong who preys on the weak and tries to disprove it by describing how she preys on the weak. I mean, even his claim that she takes advantage of weak old people with the help of the government is bullshit. She doesn't get help from the government. She manipulates the government, the courts, into giving her what she wants. The judge is ignorant to the fact that he's being taken advantage of because she is so good at manipulating him. And also, what the fuck is this claim that she is not strong in any capacity whatsoever? She manipulates government institutions, gains incredible wealth from doing so, and every time she battles Roman, outside of when he attempts to kill her and Fran, she is the unequivocal victor. Let me remind you, when Roman sends his lawyer to beat her, she sends him packing twice. When Roman sends his henchmen to retrieve his mother and they almost succeed, Marla nixes that plan. When things get more serious, Marla manipulates Jennifer into attacking her. Another win. Marla tracks down Roman's driver, follows him, incapacitates 2 of Roman's guards, kidnaps Roman, and ultimately wins the whole freaking thing. None of these examples seem like what a parasite would do.
The hearing consists of a man desperately trying to see his mother. His life is being ruined. His mother is being held hostage. Their assets are being leached away. And Marla Grayson sadistically manages to uphold an order where this man will be unable to see his mother at all ever. After it's over, on the steps of the courtroom, I believe, we get a very critical interaction. The man is driven to rage and hurls insults at Marla, death threats and similar rhetoric until he finally spits on her. She reacts angrily, stating that she will rip his balls off, and just because he has a penis doesn't make her afraid, how it doesn't entitle him to make her afraid, blah, blah, blah. And he retreats with kind of a dejected look on his face. Remember this interaction because it really becomes critical in the overarching theme of blatant misandrist hypocrisy later on. If that's intentional, well, that would be supremely well crafted, but I don't believe it is.
Upper Echelon claims this scene is misandrist hypocrisy and later explains his thinking because he sees the man's actions as justified. A woman does something horrible, she deserves to be called a bitch and get threatened with
death threats and similar rhetoric.
I feel like there's a relevant phrase, but gosh darn, I just can't think of it. But let's go through the scene. The man is flustered, obviously, since he hopes she is both killed and murdered, but he also throws some sexism into his insults, calling her a bitch multiple times and hoping she is raped. Obviously is a crime most commonly, though not always, committed against women. And this next point is more complicated since the use of the word bitch varies in our vocabulary. We say son of a bitch or that's bitchin' without it meaning anything negative, but used in this way, it is a sexist term historically meant to demean women. And as a society, we have more and more been pushing for people to stop using the word bitch as an insult towards women because of that history. Much like we gradually changed things so that using the N-word towards black people is not acceptable today. Is Marla the villain and the man and his mother the victims? Yes. Does the man use sexist language and threats during their interaction? Yes. And Marla uses that to her advantage. She uses his internalized misogyny against him to reframe the argument they're having into one she can win. That's why she doesn't argue the merits of the case. She can't win that argument at the end of the day. Put another way, if Marla were black, the man running up, calling her the N-word, and hoping that she would be lynched would also not be okay, and she would have the opportunity to reframe the argument into one about his racism instead of the case. If it were this scenario, I hope Upper Echelon would defend it, definitely publicly.
Marla preys on a long list of elderly people by working with a corrupt doctor to lie about their mental state, secure guardianship, remove their communication critically with the outside world, and lock them in a complicit retirement home. Enter Jennifer Peterson. Jennifer Peterson is a simple old lady. High-functioning, very rich, no relatives, Marla Grayson smells cash, and the doctor forges a note of some kind, resulting in an emergency hearing where Jennifer Peterson isn't present and is given, body, assets, and all, to Marla Grayson, who commits her to the home, auctions off all her possessions, and ruins her life. Simple, corrupt, predatory, and very effective.
Before we jump to the scene where he explained his thinking, I'm going to highlight this because Upper Echelon even contradicts his earlier claims that Marla is not a predator, is not strong, is only a parasite. Simple, corrupt, predatory, and very effective. So which is it, Upper Echelon? Is she a weak parasite or an effective predator?
Another important conversation takes place between Marla and her girlfriend. Marla goes on a tirade about how when men can't get women to do what they want, they threaten her. About how she has been threatened 1,000 times by family members who are men.
You know how many times I've been threatened by a man? Thousands.
And only 2 ever came to anything. And this rant conjures up the image of that initial conversation she had on those courthouse steps with the son of a woman who she was holding without visitation. Here's what all the Twitter warriors are missing, all the people praising this film, well, most of them anyways. This speech rings out like a feminist war cry. Me strong woman, men only threaten because they weak and me no do what they want me to do, so me strong. But that messaging is so pathetically twisted, it loses any semblance of meaning. If a man is arguing with a woman over trivial or inconsequential things, resorting to threats out of a belief that she will be too afraid to respond, can absolutely be driven, yes, by sexism or misogyny. The idea of threatening someone to get what you want and men threatening women in that same way is very, very real, but it's not true here. Let's replay the actual chain of events here using that first man, the man on the steps of the courtroom in the initial few minutes, as an example. Marla falsified medical reports through bribery or coercion. She then committed someone who was not in need of care to a corrupt facility, later establishing precedent where she is clearly capable and okay with torturing them through meds and exercise, and diet as well, where they would be barred from accessing the outside world, and family would not be permitted to see them. She then sold off the family's assets, financially ruining not only the elderly woman, but her son as well, and any other family she might have had. The son then tries to see her and is denied to a point where he lashes out. In the courtroom, attempting to go through proper legal channels, he is shut down by Marla and continues to be locked away from his family that he loves. All the while his and the lives of further potential parties, wife, kids, siblings, other relatives, etc., are being absolutely ruined. He then hurls insults and threats on the steps of the courtroom after every conceivable option for help has been entirely exhausted. And here's a hot take, because the expectation here has always been, recently, that everyone should always condemn that kind of language and those threats, and it's always wrong to say that to someone, especially a woman. Nope. I do not have anything to say about how he should never use that language or make such threats, because when you have incarcerated someone's loved ones for your own financial gain while ruining their lives completely, people will snap, and they will search subconsciously for any chain of existing words in the English language that might deal damage, psychological damage, anything really. And that's perfectly fine. You deserve to hear those words. Point is, the idea that when men can't get a woman to do what they want, they resort to threats is a pathetic mischaracterization of the reality behind what she actually does. She destroys families, and when someone's family is being actively destroyed, they will try anything to fix that problem, anything that they can. The gender of their assailant means less than nothing. They will level threats, use the courts if they have resources, granted, or even resort to something further because ruining lives creates desperate people. Desperate people in a corner, being poked and prodded and stolen from over and over by Marla Grayson, vindictively, psychotically. Well, I hope it's becoming clear that this entire theme of strong female power in this movie is a disgusting joke predicated on what seems to be a hatred of men, while downplaying the fact that she destroys lives, causing them to try and stop her, but that's just threats because she won't do what they want, and it's just how men are.
Okay, the scene where he explained his "if you're a woman who does a horrible thing, you deserve a sexism" is between Marla and her partner Fran. Fran's worried Roman's threat is real, and Marla counters by recalling the thousands of times she'd been threatened by men, and how those threats came through 2 times. Again, remember that she only uses gender politics in 2 of her arguments throughout the entire film. The film ain't anti-man, and in this case, it's to stop Fran questioning Marla's judgment and go along with her plan. It is not the philosophy of the film.
She heavily insinuates that she herself plays by the rules.
Playing fair is a joke invented by rich people to keep the rest of us poor.
And specifically states, talking to Jennifer Peterson, that I don't lose. If you want to beat me, get me in a courtroom. She also states, she lied in the courtroom, by the way. She also states at various different intervals that these Russians aren't playing fair.
Playing fair is a joke invented by rich people to keep the rest of us poor.
Or that they brought guns into a care home. And her premise seems to be that when playing by the rules, she always wins. So they should play by the same rules that she plays by. This is where I believe the claim of scathing critique on capitalism originates, which is honestly mentally deficient. Marla Grayson specifically violates the rules in a myriad of ways in order to trap and control seniors.
Playing fair is a joke invented by rich people to keep the rest of us poor.
Most prominently and most immediately, she violates the legitimate framework of capitalism by stealing the diamonds when she has no indication at that time to their origin, and can only plausibly assume, for the moment, that they do belong to Jennifer Peterson. Also, there's the moral quandary of whether or not stealing something that is itself stolen is a moral problem. Really, that's a whole different can of worms, and we don't want to open that. That would be like 3 hours long. But anyways.
Legitimate framework of capitalism. Again, Marla tries to reframe every conflict in a way where she is almost assured to win. She's doing what the opening monologue states explicitly. Playing fair is a lie invented by the rich. She claims that how she fights is fine and how everyone else fights is not fine, because if she can manipulate them into fighting how she fights, she will win, just like she did with Roman's lawyer. Also, Upper Echelon claims that people reading the film as a critique of capitalism is incorrect because Marla's manipulations violate the legitimate framework of capitalism. Except, what Upper Echelon fails to see is that this is an accurate representation of capitalism. Big corporations manipulate the rules with corporate lobbying. Pharmaceutical companies peddle opioids to patients who don't need it, pay a fine, and keep on trucking. There is a reason for the decline of unions. There is a reason the federal minimum wage has not matched inflation. There is a reason the wealth divide has gotten so severe. It's because of, as Echelon so ignorantly states, the legitimate framework of capitalism.
Furthermore, she's engaged in 2 separate games within a capitalist system. One is akin to slavery and involves the capture and perhaps deliberate torture of seniors while denying their family any access whatsoever, and the other is the pursuit of money. One of these pursuits is an organic part of capitalism, the quest for money, absolutely, and the other has nothing to do with it.
Upper Echelon is wrong again. I mean, a quick Google search into the realities of for-profit prisons would be enough, but we can go further. In the US, the first incarnation of the police was a slave patrol. Today, that institution over-polices minority and poor neighborhoods, incarcerating radically more people of color compared to white people for the same crimes. And when those prisoners are sent to for-profit prisons whose contracts require a minimum occupancy, that's capitalism with an enslaved workforce. Is this legitimate framework still so legitimate?
Peter Dinklage is mostly out of options and decides, whatever, fine, let's go scorched earth. He breaks into the doctor's home, well, not he physically, but his henchmen break into the doctor's home and stages a suicide. But here's the problem. The doctor who forged a test result to get his mother committed, or at least forged a note recommending that that should happen, could have just as easily forged another note or made another statement to get her out. In fact, that's explicitly stated by the lawyer, Dean Erickson, the expensive mafia lawyer, in his private meeting with Marla. So the fact that this is well known and well established as a viable method of seeking resolution, but just gets ignored, is our first real plot hole.
Only one thing to correct here. As the lawyer would say, lady henchman. But straight up, this is the only complaint in this entire video that has any merit. We don't know if there's a cut scene of the doctor preferring to die rather than admit to corruption / giving up her accomplices, or one with the lady henchman saying as much, but as it is, we don't have a scene like that in the film. But horrifying plot hole? Please.
Then Marla and her girlfriend go on the run. They find a house that's on their company's books, easily traceable, but unsold, and they stay there.
This complaint is weird because Roman and his cronies never find out Marla and Fran are on the run. The next time they come into conflict, the lady henchman has kidnapped Marla, and Roman's cronies find Fran at their house. Roman even says, "I have men tearing apart your office, your home." And even if he did know, how is it easily traceable? Have we seen Roman's cronies show any expertise at hacking a computer? And even then, they'd have to guess that Marla and Fran chose to hide out in one of their empty, unsold properties instead of at a friend's place, or just anywhere else on planet Earth. And after that, Roman would have to send his cronies to each abandoned house. I'm gonna add one thing off script. They're also massively incompetent out of literally the female henchmen.
However, her girlfriend goes home to get their passports, and Marla gets abducted in a parking garage. This leads to a meeting between Marla and Peter Dinklage. Marla acts like she is unafraid of death and cites how it feels like nothing, so why would I be afraid? Emphasis on feels like nothing. Peter Dinklage talks a lot about torture and then doesn't torture her at all. He shows her a photo of her mother where she seems to be unswayed and doesn't care, and then he doesn't use the girlfriend as leverage, who had just been beaten and captured by his henchmen in their home, for the record, when she was getting the passports. Ultimately saying, get rid of her and make it look organic. That's a few more plot holes right there, but now is when it really falls apart.
Here, Upper Echelon is merely stating the facts of the scene, emphasizing certain sentences, and claiming there are a bunch of plot holes. Yet, when you watch the scene, you can see that Roman realizes Marla isn't going to cave. He can read her accurately, and instead of folding in front of his cronies, he cuts things short and does what he was going to do the whole time anyway. Bye-bye, Marla and Fran.
What follows is not one, but two failed hit jobs against Marla and her girlfriend. Marla is made to drive her car with various systems in place to make it appear as if she is drunk driving. She somehow wakes up, despite being knocked unconscious, kicks out the back windshield, however many feet underwater, actively, swims to safety, pulls out a tooth, walks to a gas station, gets a cab, goes home, and makes it there before her girlfriend dies, seeing as the stove is on. And keep in mind, we are given a clearly established timeline because Peter Dinklage explicitly says, right now, men are tearing apart your office and your home, which means the girlfriend is captured and knocked out while Marla is in conversation with him in whatever quarry or mine it is. And yet after the staging, the breaking out, the walking, the cab, the getting home, all of it, she's still fine and alive. Yeah, sure.
This seemed like the second of two legitimate critiques of the film, but I actually found out that it takes about 3 hours before a gas leak like we see can become explosive in a single level apartment. Their home with multiple levels would take even longer. I don't see that as like a flaw in his criticism. I would have thought the same. I just thought, well, I wonder how long that would take.
They escape. Oh, and the sedatives they used on her before the staged driving accident, right, when they first initially kidnapped her, were powerful enough to knock her out for a few hours because daylight becomes full-on nighttime. But then they knock her out for a couple of minutes with a different sedative so that she woke up before the car fully sinks. And all these henchmen, these skilled kind of hitman henchmen, they don't even stay to check if it worked. Yeah, plot hole number 3, 4, 5, 6. I've completely lost track how many.
It's only one plot hole so far, Upper Echelon, and here's why all these plot holes aren't plot holes. He starts by claiming that the first sedative that knocked out Marla, the one shot into her, was strong enough to knock Marla out for multiple hours, except Marla just got off the phone with Fran, where they discuss Fran returning to their home to grab their passports. Then, when we see Fran at home, it's already nighttime. So did Fran take multiple hours to get home? I think not. So the claim that Marla was out for multiple hours is not as rock solid as Upper Echelon thought. Then he talks about the fact that a different sedative with a plot hole was a plot hole because she woke up before drowning in the faked car crash. How is that a plot hole? They use chloroform and, an unspecified amount of minutes later, she wakes up once the car starts crashing into shit. As far as claiming the henchmen are competent, allow me to just play this little supercut.
Where is she now?
Oh, I don't know.
You didn't think to ask. You didn't think to get some basic information on the situation.
And as far as the henchmen not sticking around, they jammed her seatbelt before shooting her car off that cliff. I don't see anything inconsistent with this crew deciding to immediately leave so they don't risk being seen at the scene of the crime.
They, Marla and her girlfriend, go to their somehow undiscovered new hideout despite being officially on their company books, and the henchmen ransacked the office looking for any evidence of the diamonds, so why would they not realistically follow up on all the other whatever, and come up with a plan. Track down the license plate, which leads them to the driver, which leads them to the mafia boss. There were a bunch more plot holes there. Like, there's so many plot holes now, but it's tedious at this point to go over them all.
Again, hacking the computer, imagining Marla and Fran would have been hiding out in an empty property on their books, searching all those properties, and that's all assuming that Roman hasn't written off the diamonds as a loss by now. They're $200K a diamond, which is way less than the $10 million he later says he can pay to Marla easily. And what are all these invisible plot holes Upper Echelon tries claiming exist? Fran asks her cop X
I used to like being called Frankie.
to track a license plate. They follow the car, and Marla walks into the parking lot where the car is. Oh my gosh, I'm in danger of being destroyed by all these plot holes.
Marla tases everyone, drugs the mafia boss, leaves him out in the middle of nowhere, and when he's discovered, he's a John Doe because he has no identification, so she becomes his legal guardian. That's where one more critical conversation happens. Peter Dinklage says, "Aren't you worried I'll still have you killed? I easily could." And she says, "I could just as easily have you killed as well at this point," which is entirely untrue. They are in a hospital, so unless she has people so far under her control that they are willing to commit traceable murder in a medical environment, he is safe there. He's also a global, powerful mafia figure. So we are to believe his men aren't able to find him, or aren't even looking.
So let me get this straight. A mafia boss who went into hiding and who put his mother into hiding lest his enemies go after either of them.
You faked your own death. And then were afraid your Cleveland friends would use your mother to flush you out, so you turned her into Jennifer Peterson.
Is supposed to give up his name in a hospital? Not only could that draw the attention of police, but also his old enemies. So when he refuses to give his real name, Marla can claim memory loss, move him to a facility where she has a Dr. Rice she can tell what to do. This isn't some magical fucking Harry Potter threat. I'm gonna transfigure you. It's a death threat.
Or he isn't able to get in contact somehow. Once he finally does get in contact, and he will up his security, and she is dead with no recourse because he absolutely does have contacts who will perform that kind of service, evidenced 3 times over at this point.
Again, his henchmen are buffoons, and Upper Echelon, could you remind me how Jennifer Peterson got in contact with him? Oh yeah, she didn't.
She is not actually able to have him killed. Also, she's his guardian, so it would trace directly back to her anything that did happen if she didn't do it precisely and expertly. She could make his life worse, perhaps, temporarily, but she does not have even close to the amount of power at that moment in time that is projected. And he should know this. Factually speaking, he does know this. There was one point where she did, and that was when he was unconscious in the car with her as they put him in the middle of nowhere, and no one knew where he was. But that was a finite period of time, and it has since passed. She stole his mother, his diamonds, and humiliated him, now pretending she has power over his literal state of life and death. With one phone call, he could rally his troops, by the way, which is untrue. The power over life and death is completely untrue.
This is a weird claim. Multiple people she's done this to are said to have died still stuck in the scheme she trapped them in. Of natural causes, too. Them not being able to beat her and get out, say it with me, Upper Echelon, is an example of her power. Roman being in this situation is an example of her power. The idea that there's no reality where she gets away with this is imbecilic.
And he decides, okay, let's make a huge company together. Then we get a montage about how powerful and fierce she is and never compromise, etc., which leads to the perfect ending. And yes, I said perfect, because for a movie with so many brutal flaws all along the way, it really is the perfect ending. Marla is walking down the street, and the same man from the beginning of the movie walks up, tells her that his mother passed away alone in the facility without him because of her, and then Marla dies, exactly how she deserves, at the hands of a man whose life she ruined, who she demeaned, whose threats she played off as meaningless because that's just what men do, and whose family she fully destroyed. Marla Grayson gets the precise thing that she wholeheartedly, absolutely, undeniably deserves. And one final quote about how she is just getting started plays out in the background, insinuating that perhaps her legacy will live on. Her girlfriend and her new partner might continue the business, cut one head off the Hydra and 2 more spawn, etc., etc. Whatever it is, the end.
Correction! It's a montage of her self-propaganda. That's what this is. And frankly, how Upper Echelon sees this as a perfect ending, but still makes all these weird bad faith criticisms against it's just even more baffling to me. The villain protagonist opens the film stating the philosophy she uses to justify exploiting people for profit, and by the end, the villain is defeated once someone stops playing her game. The villain is defeated.
I would like to propose a theory, and that theory is that Marla actually died in the car. She drowned, and everything that happened after is a power fantasy seen by her dying mind. This is pure speculation, but it's driven by one particular scene. As she struggles free from the car and swims upward, it doesn't actually appear to be upward movement. That could be deliberate camera work for intentional suspense and real deliberate purposes, but it also could indicate that she is actually drowning. She also appears to be possibly breathing in water at that point as well, which again could just be a deliberate trick from the director to make you believe that it might be over till it isn't. But if this theory is true, it would explain so much about the following scenes. If Marla is simply playing out her fantasy as the neurons fire one last time in her mind, it would perfectly explain how she is able to make it home before her girlfriend succumbs to the gas, which is entirely unrealistic, owing to the fact that we have an established timeline. It would explain how her half-cocked, idiotically impulsive plan of just going to a license plate address, which suddenly turns into, oh, it's his driver, but she had all the components for this precisely executed plan ready to go, with her already in the car, a plan that involved entrance into a secure building and incapacitating 2 guards. She had no possible way of knowing that there would be a second guard, with the sedatives, while she could not possibly have known what address she was actually visiting initially, just from that license plate on her hand, evidenced by her exclamation of, it's the driver, to her partner. And it would explain how, upon capturing and leaving this man to be found, she gets guardianship, and he offers her everything that she ever wanted all at once in one conversation. The only wrinkle is that ending scene, but honestly, maybe it's her conscience. She's an evil person. I don't say that lightly. She's not an anti-hero. She's an evil person. It's entirely plausible that her conscience does exist somewhere deep down. By the way, everybody's obviously rooting for Peter Dinklage because at least he's trying to save his mother. She's just trying to hurt people. This is the most unsuccessful anti-hero I've honestly ever seen in my life. But that conscience, that fear as well, because it could be fear, manifested by this man from the beginning of the movie, the man who she says only threatens because men can't get strong women to do what they want, while she ruined his entire life and the life of his mother. That really could be fear, and that's the explanation for why that scene occurred. It's possible in my eyes that the absurdity of this film's second half, because the second half is far more absurd than the first half, is explained away because it's just a delusional psycho woman's fantasy that plays out in her mind as the lights go out. And that, to me, might actually be a lot more satisfying given the context of who she was and what she did in this film.
I love film theory, so sorry to poo-poo all over this one, but Upper Echelon then poses a theory that Marla actually died instead of escaping the car crash. He claims her having 2 tasers, a sedative, a wig, and a pair of sunglasses when she earlier stated she had a plan is inconceivable. Also claiming she broke into a secure building when... no, she walked in, then walked into the parking lot. And Upper Echelon tries claiming she gets everything she ever wanted. That's just a blatant lie. She wanted $10 million. And Roman says he can give her that after she has beaten him. But instead, Roman offers a win-win arrangement where they both start a company together. She'll benefit from his financial resources, and he'll benefit from her intelligence and cunning. Hit the like button. No, but ultimately, this is a weird attempt at criticism dependent on ignoring most of the film Upper Echelon is even trying to criticize. I can't say with certainty that it's motivated by internalized sexism and some other weird ideas about capitalism, but I can say with certainty that he's wrong about everything except one horrifying plot hole. You know, I might need to take that back because I found at least 2 moments where he seemingly called Marla a bitch, then cut it out in editing. I wasn't sure when I heard the first one, but the second one makes it pretty evident.
She's a whiny, deluded, petulant bitch who wants to be the only one allowed to commit crimes at the idiocy and arrogance of a psychotic bitch.
Weird that he'd have such confidence in calling her a bitch multiple times in the video, but then thought better of it. What's up with that, Upper Echelon? Like, if she deserves it, that's your moral philosophy, right?
ultimately liked that she got shot. That was what I was waiting for. I was like, if she don't get shot, I'm over it. But as I started to think about it, I really understood how that scene was so crucial to kind of putting in perspective the whole narrative that was supposed to be written throughout the movie. It was to illustrate that Marla is not a hero. You are not intended to root for Marla. And I find that very interesting because so many people were saying they really wanted me to root for her. No! I don't understand how anybody could have misinterpreted that. There's no way that this movie wanted you to root for her. She's just the main person in the story and she's just awful. Just because she's the lead character does not mean that she's a good person, nor does it mean that they thought she was by making her the main character. That was also a criticism that some people had that I saw, where they were like, they didn't really give her a background. She was just kind of this villain. And I was like, there's a reason why they did that as well. Again, they're not trying to make her into something good or desirable. They're not trying to humanize a person that treats old people like that's not the objective here. I would have more problem with that. To give her all of these reasons for why she was terrible would ultimately undermine the overall message of that people are terrible every day with and without excuses. She is not a hero.